Well, my name's Lindsay Reade, and I married Tony in 1977. Met him in 76.
So, and what were your first impressions of Tony when you met him?
Well, I first saw him on television, and I just knew straight away that I was going to know him. And I quite admired him because he was brave doing that kamikaze thing. And that's what I admired at the end, how brave he was. The way he dealt with his illness and the business of dying, because that is a business, isn't it, really? It's part of life. And so it was kind of, it ended the way it began. I was admiring his bravery.
Again, going back to Tony, because I mean, he was an unusual character, to say the least, wasn't he?
Eccentric, a bit.
Yeah, so how was that? Because he wouldn't have seemed... Because, again, you know, all the years I knew him, he wasn't your kind of laddish bloke in any way, shape or form. You know, insofar as, like, if you're out having a drink with him, you know, you wouldn't say, oh, look, have you seen her over there, Tony, or anything like that. You know, he wouldn't sort of respond like other blokes would. And
no, well, that's nice. He was dignified.
explain it.
What, explain why he wasn't a lad?
No, we'll just explain about his character, that's all.
Well, he was very highly intelligent, and he was well brought up. He had a very good parents, good background. He was very much loved by 3 adults, and you know, I think he was above all that kind of thing. Thank God there are men like that.
Look at me.
Sorry, Alan.
And how did, because again, he, you know, when he was hanging out with people like Rob Gretton, you know, Alan Erasmus, Alan Wise, people like that, it seemed like it was a very much a bloke's group. Did that make you feel shoved out in any way?
Well, I was shoved out, to be honest. But I mean, you do know it was our money that started Factory Records off. I mean, you know, we were married. I feel like I've been written out of all of that. But I didn't. I mean, I was raised to think women didn't have jobs. I thought women had children, and I didn't do that either. So failed on all counts.
Oh, blimey, Lindsay. No, but explain that about, it was your money, you know, that paid for you know, for
well,
Joy
I mean,
Division.
You know, it was our marital money. It was, if you like. So, but so I think I was part of it. I mean, I was a co-founder of Factory Records, whatever anyone says. And I was involved with it, but I mean, he wasn't really a laddish kind of a bloke. You're right, he didn't hang out like that. I mean, we smoked dope, we didn't even drink. So
I'm trying to think, and explain about those days. You know, where you went, because you know, he'd take you on strange dates, wouldn't he?
Strange dates.
Well, it'd be a place that you wouldn't necessarily want to go.
Oh no, I always wanted to go. We were both enthusiastic about music very much. So yeah, I enjoy. I mean, I wasn't keen on slaughtering the dogs, but.
but how did you respond?
I was keen on rafters. You ran rafters, didn't you? Yeah. You know, that was great. We were very compatible in that way.
How did you respond when he said he was gonna spend I don't know, was it £10,000 of your money basically on the Joy Division album?
Well, I didn't consider it to be my money, really, even though we were married, and it was me that told him he should spend it, because I was against having money in a bank. I thought it was politically incorrect to keep money, because it's like keeping it in a dead stone vault and stopping it circulate. I wouldn't feel like that now, but having said that, I still haven't got any in the dead stone vault, but my policies have changed.
And again, you know, when you saw all the films that were made, you know, a few years, well, of course, the most recent one, Control, and then 24-Hour Party People, it nearly killed me. But I actually had to say to Tony, I said, the thing is, Steve Coogan has an impression of you, but it's still Steve Coogan. I said, can you imagine me saying this to Tony? I said, but don't take this the wrong way, Tony, but he lacked your charisma. Do you understand where I'm coming from here?
Well, I thought he had loads of charisma. I thought he added it in a way, myself. It was a different kind of charisma. It wasn't quite... But the guy that plays Tony in Control lacks Tony's charisma, and I think that guy was aping Steve Coogan a bit. And I mean, that guy, he wasn't sexy, which Tony was, and he was a bit of a wally, which Tony wasn't. I mean, he was very bright. So I know where you're coming from a bit, but I thought Steve Coogan added something.
I didn't think he was tough enough, Steve.
You didn't think he was tough enough?
Not in 24-hour Party People. Not in the way that I knew Tony. I don't mean that Tony was hard as nails, but Tony could take a lot more than that, and you know what I mean, give it back with a lot more dignity.
Well, it was funny, wasn't it? That was the main thing. And Tony always thought fantasy's better than reality, which which it is.
I mean, what are your enduring memories of Tony? You know, the good times, the bad times, and any sort of funny stories about him that might tell people a bit more about him.
What's that? Oh, is that your phone?
No. It's a programme in itself.
Peter Kay. Hello. Get closer to that microphone, Lindsay. That's all right, but yeah, about 6 inches away. Again, you know, to be married to Tony, and he was a hard bloke, you know, to sort of pin down, wasn't he? Is that because you had to share him with so many people?
Yeah, I did get jealous. I was never jealous of any women. It was more, I was jealous of the time that he spent away from me. Because he's so enthusiastic about it. You know, he used to write lists on his hand. He'd have about 25 things to do in a day. And I'd be thinking, what am I doing today? I didn't have the same motivation.
Well, I mean, because I was going to say, I'm trying to describe it. It was almost like he had ants in his pants all the time, Tony.
Yeah. Suitably named. Ant.
No, but you know what I mean? Is that because he was easily bored, do you think?
No, I think it's because of his brain. It was just kind of overactive. I mean, really, really clever guy. Very well read as well. I mean, what I remember about him is how he always had a quote for every occasion from some literary reference point.
Did you never see him studying them?
No, and sometimes he was wrong. Why did you see him studying them?
No, I just remember going round to his flat once and taking a mickey out of him because he had all the books on the table. I said, I was making out like he'd never read one of them. We're just there for visitors.
But I mean, he was a very special guy. It's like Alan said, I don't know if you said that quote, Alan. Alan, it's from the Pally Canon. Where's that?
Oh, no, we'll let Alan say it in a minute. But,
no, I didn't mean that quote. This is another one. This one's about the gods love those who burn with
the gods love those best that burn with the brightest flame.
That's it. The gods love those best that burn with the brightest flame. But then it goes on, those that burn with the brightest flame die young, because you kind of burn out, don't you?
Yeah, you could never have imagined Tony doing that. I mean, you saw him towards the end, you know, with his illness and all the rest of it. I mean, how hard was that for you? Because obviously you hadn't been married to him for years then. Yeah,
but we've been friends all along, you know. And, I mean, it was a very valuable friendship we had. And I felt very privileged to be able to spend time with him in the last year because I got to observe at close quarters that he really, truly was an exceptional person.
Well, why did he want to keep it such a secret as well, how ill he was? I mean, I rang him up, you know, just 2 weeks before he died, and he was making out to me he was getting better, even though he had a clot on his lung. To which I gave the medical thing, fucking hell, Tony. But that'll get opposite. But do you know what I mean? It was like...
Yeah, but he was always Mr. Positive, wasn't he? He put a positive spin on everything. I mean, like the day factory went bankrupt. It was, you know, so he always puts the good side on everything.
I think it should be known, Terry, that this girl was looking after him when he was dying. You know,
yeah, but this is what I want to get. Yeah, but I mean, Are you not comfortable talking about that?
Well, no, that's not. I mean, we spent weekends together, that's all, and things like that. I mean, it wasn't that much, and I didn't do that much. But honestly, I'm so grateful for that. All I can say is Tony made it easier for me to say goodbye to him because of that special time we had this year.
I'm trying to think.
It's hard because I don't want to upset Yvette either. Not that she gives a shit about me, but
Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference.
Living with that man now.
Really?
No.
You left him?
Well, I don't know what happened.
Hey, I'm taping this.
My death is greatly exaggerated.
Reports of my death.
That was
That's it.
Oscar Wilde, wasn't it?
No, we put Mark
Was
Twain.
It?
Yeah.
Move that closer in.
So,
Yes, right.
Will that do, Terry?
No, quickly. Just any funny stories about Tony. I mean, did he have good taste in everything? Would you say?
Not always, not in everything. Lots of things, but I mean, I remember once he brought this. We lived in a 2 up, 2 down stone cottage, and he was getting into the high tech, factory records, high tech, and he came home with this black trolley, kind of high tech trolley, and I thought it just didn't fit in our house. And we had a row about it. Our house was on a hill, and I ended up opening the door and shoving it out of the front door, and it started rolling down the hill. And then he went and got it back. And no, so we didn't always agree on taste, if that's what you mean.
No, because he was one of the first people I ever saw sporting a man bag.
A man bag? Oh, yeah. And painted toenails to go with it.
Saddlebags.
I quite like that saddlebag, actually. I quite liked it. I mean, I don't know why men don't. How do men survive without bags? I don't know. I don't know how you cope.
Have a big lump in your pocket, don't you?
You do.
Yes, well, the mind boggles.
And I mean, how do you think? I mean, obviously, it's all very personal for you, and it's a different level. But how do you think people in Manchester will remember Tony?
Well, I think Manchester's just poorer for not having him anymore, really. I mean, you can remember him, but it won't be the same without him. That's all. Because we're missing him.
Right, now I'll let Alan do his little thing.
3 quotes, you can edit them out. I was watching Jack Kerouac reading from On the Road the other night, which is fabulous. And if I was to say anything about Tony, it's a quote from the end of On the Road. It says, I paraphrase it, I remember Tony Wilson. I remember Tony Wilson. I remember Tony Wilson. But Lindsay likes the one from the Pally Canon, which befits Tony. The gods love those best that burn with the brightest flame. Those who burn with the brightest flame die young. The gods love those best that burn with the brightest flame. What was the other one, Lindsay?
The one about he was some kind of man.
Yeah, and in the end, all you can say about a person like that is to quote from a film which we all loved, and which Tony liked as well, called A Touch of Evil. When they asked Marlene Dietrich at the end what they could say about him, she said, laconically, he was some kind of man. And I think that befits Tony. He was some kind of man.
It certainly was. Well said.
Right, just say you are what you did, so Tosh Ryan, maybe.
I'm Anthony Ryan Carter, known as Tosh Ryan. I'm the founder of Rabid Records, along with Lawrence Beadle and Martin Hannett. I'm notorious for not liking pop music, really. And I'm also notorious for putting out some of the worst records that have ever been issued in Manchester, or in the country, in fact.
Don't believe a word of that, Tosh. And you're also not a fan of doing this kind of thing, are you?
No, in fact, as you know, this morning I was rather reluctant, yeah.
But I mean, let's go back, because you were involved in those early days of Manchester, when what we had was basically this legacy of loads of pop hits in the 60s, and then there was 10cc, and then there was some blokes called Music Force.
Yeah,
and it became
Music
Rabid
Force is
Records.
Something. It was an ideological thing. It wasn't. It grew out of the music business. It grew out of the fact that there were lots of bands who were suddenly, on the scrap heap at the end of the 60s. Herman's Hermits and all them kind of bands. It's bands that came out of Kennedy Street. and they weren't working. And lots of people who had worked 6-7 days a week suddenly found themselves having to create their own gigs. And Music Force became like a self-management, a self-promoting agency, in order to get those people work. So it had political motives. It was actually meant to be a cooperative. It was meant to be the musicians working for themselves, doing things for themselves. But musicians, especially pop musicians, their politics are up the chute. They're nearly all egotistical capitalists. So it didn't really function very well. It didn't work. It collapsed, because there wasn't the same kind of political interest that the founders of it had.
I mean, how much of a template did that set though for what emerged then as the punk scene, which was a bit different to anywhere else in Manchester?
It was mainly the instigation of Martin Hannett. Martin, we knew that there was like a lull in the music scene, and we knew that there was going to be something would happen. Something was going to kick it into a new phase. We didn't know what it was, and it turned out to be punk. And we discovered that through the various things that people like Pete Shelley were doing, Richard Boone. They introduced us to what was taking place. Them bringing the Pistols up here and all that sort of thing. And Martin went looking for a band for us to have, and he found Slaughter and the Dogs.
and I mean, Slaughter and the Dogs, people now rave about them. Well, they're very collectible, aren't they? Where have all the boot boys gone, cranked up really high?
Collect them and bury them, that's what I say. No, it was never been my thing. I've never really liked any of that music. I didn't like anything we actually put out. I liked the Jilted John record because it was theatrical. That's what appealed to me about Graham Fellows. He was an actor. It wasn't the fact that he'd written a stunning pop song, because it was crap, And but that appealed to me. It had a narrative. It had a story. It was part of a bigger plot going on in Graham's head, and I liked that. And that's the only thing I really felt proud of doing, and putting out.
I mean, the irony is, it's almost like Rabid Records and that kind of template has been almost written out of, Manchester music history in some ways, and Factory has taken its place. And yet, I can't think of many Factory records that did better in the charts than Jilted John.
No. Well, where did Blue Monday get? Didn't they have a number one we wanted?
It got a platinum.
Yeah,
I mean, it sold well. It didn't get the chart position, I don't think. I think maybe the Monday's Step On, did that get to number 2?
Well, Graham Fellows thing did actually go to 3, I think. And it stayed there for a couple of weeks. Luckily, because there was a strike at the manufacturing plants, so no records were getting issued.
You don't make money off singles as much as albums, though, do you?
No, but then you did. I mean, we sold something like 500,000 on that single, and just that single, plus the royalties for the advance for the album, grossed something like 750 grand. I believe. I'd have to ask Lawrence, wouldn't I, really, because he knew where the money was. But I think it made something in that region, like 500,000 to 750,000.
And did that impress Tony when he found out about that?
Yeah, I mean, Tony was he used to hang around the office. Well, not hang around. Alan used to hang around. Alan Erasmus used to pop in virtually every day because that's what Alan does. He visits people with bagels, in the cream cheese, first thing in the morning. And he used to call in, see what we were doing. And at the same time, Rob Gretton was also involved because he was working with Slaughter and the Dogs, and he was doing the DJing, and gigs we were doing, he was there. So they had a good idea of what was taking place, and I think they learned a hell of a lot, and then took it away and made something out of it.
Well, so how would you compare what became the Factory Records setup with what was the Rabid Records setup? Well,
Rabid Records it was never intended to be a successful commercial venture. It was.
Yeah, but Factory wasn't either. Well, at least I didn't think it was. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, well, no, that. I mean, I disagree because I think that Factory actually arrived right on the crest of Thatcherism and, the whole selfish attitude that was taking place, people's, the cult of the self and all that sort of thing, individualism. And I think that the one thing that they did that we obviously didn't do was to package stuff. They thought very seriously about packaging stuff and how to promote it and how to get it to into people's attention, and that struck me as being very much like a conservative, new marketing Thatcherite sort of way of. Didn't matter about the content as long as the packaging was right. That's the way I saw it.
I didn't think they were good enough at doing it to be conservatives. You have to ring them up for every record they bought out, and then it was quicker to buy it from the shop if it was in the shop.
Well, I think there were a lot of ethics and attitudes around at that time that were lip service. We were talking about being, socialist music force. We were doing, but everyone was in for a grab for themselves. It didn't last that long. That kind of socialist fervour. I mean, the things that we did with Music Force, which I found interesting, was the gigs that we did to support things like anti-nuclear campaigns, anti-war campaigns, right-to-work march campaigns, that kind of stuff. Rock Against Racism, all those sort of things that Music Force supported, I thought were valuable. I didn't think that putting out records by Eddie Banger were that valuable. You know what I mean? Crap.
Oh, I think you're putting down something which people have got a lot of affection for in this city.
Yeah. They're largely musically stupid in this city, aren't they, though? The only good pop band, I think, since the 1960s, I don't know why I'm telling you this, since the 1960s, since all that other stuff went, that was pop music, which I didn't like, but was pop music, the only good band that's come out since then, I think, was Oasis. I think they're the only ones that have actually captured that thing of being pop stars and a pop band, and I quite like them.
Well, I mean, that was the whole idea of Manchester with the Happy Mondays, with the Stone Roses. In many ways, they weren't trying to be anything weird. They were aiming to be pop bands. They just hadn't quite got it off to a T yet, but they were getting there.
I missed all that stuff. I had no idea what was going on when Stone Roses. I'd only heard of the Stone Roses through someone I knew that was at a film school, who happened to be going out with Ian Brown. I didn't know anything about them at all till way after it had all gone.
Did you not feel as if you're part of all that? I mean, for instance, Manny out of the Stone Roses loved Slaughtering the Dogs.
Well, I don't know why I didn't. Anyway, I honestly didn't like it.
You do know it was me that got them their record deal, don't you?
With the Roses?
Yeah.
And with
Silvertone.
Rod McKenna.
Roddy McKenna, yeah. It's another thing I never get credited for. I just
want to get in there and say it.
Yeah, I'm a bit confused.
No,
here.
hang on. No, you're being interviewed right now.
No, because
we'll get back to personalities. Hold on, we'll bung you back. We'll bung you back in a minute. Right. So when did you first meet Tony, Tosh?
Probably around about the time we were actually putting Music Force together, very early 70s. I didn't quite know what he was or who he was, but I used to come across him at places like there was a mansion. I don't know if you remember that big house on Mersey Road, Mersey Mansion it was called, and a lot of people lived in this house. I think Erasmus lived there at one point, and for some reason I used to be around there quite regularly. It was a dope Vipers hideout, and Tony used to appear there quite often, on his way to somewhere or on his way back from somewhere, I don't know. And he was just around, I mean, I didn't pay him a lot of attention.
And did you know? I mean, again, you know, did you have thoughts about what he was doing over the years? Was there ever any of that feeling of that should have been us? That should have been Rabid Records?
No, that's the one thing I didn't feel. What intrigues me about Tony was his ability. He's like to adapt to things and you know, and to take on board these other things. You know, like going to New York and coming back with the ideas of, you know, whatever it was, Danceteria or those kind of things, and trying to put it into Manchester. I've never felt that chauvinistic about Manchester. I'm not that. I don't go around waving a flag for Manchester. I think it's a bit of a dump, really. I don't live here, do I? But you know what I mean? I haven't got that deep sincerity about I'm a Mancunian. I don't see the point in that, you know. Whereas Tony did. He would push this point all the time, you know.
But why do you think that Tony and Rob Gretton as well, and maybe Alan, had that kind of thing? Because I mean, I don't know if it's just. I'm not sure if it isn't a Catholic thing, that whole community-mindedness.
Oh, I'm right here with you now. You think there's a Catholic mafia?
Well, no, not like a Catholic mafia. I mean, it's almost sort of as if, you know, if you grow up a Catholic, it's almost impossible to be a hedonist. You can have a good time, but you can't. You'll never quite become a complete hedonist, because there's always like this guilt thing where there should be a higher purpose to what you do.
Yeah, I mean, both Rob and Tony were fairly highly educated people. I mean, I think, if I'm not wrong, Rob was head boy at St. Bede's, wasn't he? Yeah, I think he might well have.
He went to St. Bede's. He wasn't head boy, I can tell you.
No, I don't think so.
Tony was in his year. He didn't even make sixth form, did he, Rob?
You're joking, really?
No, he couldn't be bothered.
He didn't even do it.
So you didn't have head boys in 50.
All right, well, Phil Griffin. Well, yeah, but I mean, they're fairly hedonistic, both of them. You know.
Fairly, there's having a good time, there's fiesta time, and there's making it a lifestyle choice.
I am interested in this theory, though, about the Catholics, because I had this feeling that Factory Records was a fairly Catholic closed shop for a while, you know, and that, I don't know how much of this is true, but Martin used to wind me up, Martin Hannett, you know, because another Catholic would say, you know, you don't get on that label unless you're a Catholic, you know. And he'd gone to Factory, you know, and we were saying, oh, he'll get in. Me and Lawrence saying, he'll be all right, he's a Catholic, you know. I'm a Catholic, but I've never, you know. If
that was the case, they'd have signed the Smiths and fucked off New Order, wouldn't they? Sorry.
Yeah. But I don't know, I mean, who'd sign that miserable wretch?
Great band.
No. I mean, I have just no interest in any of that stuff.
So I mean, finally, Tosh, when was the last time you actually bumped into Tony?
It was. I think it was probably in the last year of his life. I can't remember. I saw him a couple of times when he was taking time off work. It was after he'd had a stroke, didn't he? And he'd stopped.
You saw him at the Hacienda exhibition. No, that night with Paul Morley.
Yeah, I've seen him. I saw him after that. I saw him walking his dog quite a lot, you know, and I occasionally bumped into him in the passing through the corner house. But there's things about Tony that intrigue me. You know, the way that he traded on this business of having a collection of quotations. You know, I mean, it was as if like he knew everything, but really all he knew was like a quotation from everybody. You know, and it intrigued me. You know, like you'd be talking, you'd be saying, oh, yes, but as S.J. Perelman said, you know, and you think, what the fuck, what? Where's he coming from now, you know? Or, you know, Cho In Lai, he'd quote from, you know, Robespierre or someone, you know? And I always thought that's a kind of cool way of being, you know, like looking really knowledgeable, but only having to carry around, a small amount of information.
I always felt like he did it half tongue-in-cheek all the time. You know, that he kind of...
There's a few of them do it. Chris Lee does it. You know, he's another one. He's full of these quotes. Bruce Mitchell, you know, it's like a disease they've got. You know, they're constantly quoting, you know, people. It's true, though, isn't it? You know.
Bruce Mitchell.
As S.J. Perelman said, why do they always quote S.J. Perelman? Who the hell was he? Yeah. I love the Marx Brothers.
Well, why do you think that that sort of generation of the old grammar school boys do that? Do you think it was always important to them that everyone thought that they were clever?
Yeah, they've got hundreds of books that they never read. I've got hundreds of books that I never read, but they get like quotes, so you think they read the books. I'm sure that's what they're up to. I don't think Tony could have read. Well, he probably did. He was a bit of an avid reader, wasn't he? But the amount of historical stuff that he quoted, especially things like from the Mao Zedong revolution, I don't think he was the sort of person that took that much interest in the communist revolution. But he'd come out with stuff about that.
And how do you think he'll be remembered in Manchester?
Well, I'll remember him quite fondly because, I had quite a lot of respect for Tony because, like he said, I'm a twat, and he knew, that, people would say, you're a twat, and he'd say, I know, I am, and yeah, he'd still bash on with things, and I thought he was a good TV presenter. I always thought that. And so I've got a degree of respect for him, and I had lots of arguments with him over the years about pop music. He once said to me, or no, it wasn't to me, it was on a radio programme. I heard him say that the most important piece of music of the 20th century was the Beatles' Love Me Do. And I just collapsed, I just thought, where's this guy coming from? The most important piece of music in the 20th century. Well,
yeah, but Tosh, I'd say that'd say more about you than it did about Tony.
Yeah, it negates a hell of a lot of other stuff.
Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe you've got a different view of him than me, because the one thing that would have stopped him being a twat was the fact that I never thought there was anything precious about Tony at all in that way. If you didn't know him, you might think that. But I didn't think he was precious.
I don't know. There was a touch of the Macphistos about him. I thought, as he entered a room, there was, an aura, which is fine. I have no problem with that. And when you say how will he be remembered, I'll remember him for those things, those quotes, and incidents like that, or putting me down because I liked something like jazz music or whatever, he'd have an opinion about that, and and so, yeah, I'll remember him for little cutting things like that and those quotes. But I don't think he should be remembered by a bloody statue. I think that's absolutely ludicrous. A statue of Tony Wilson. Where would they put it? Where would they? I mean, it's bad enough having a big photograph of him out there, but a statue. It's like the only people that have got statues to them in Manchester are royalty and people who were involved in the free trade movement. They're all capitalists. John Bright or whoever in Albert Square. You don't want him remembering like that, or naming a street after him. Wilson Street.
Tony Wilson Way, I think they're going to call it.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think, it's like, I was going to quote someone then. I was going to quote Dizzy Gillespie.
There you go. It's catchy.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. Something about old Cadillacs never die, they just fade away. That's how he should go. He should just, those that want to remember him should remember him.
Old punks never die. The trousers just get tighter. That's my favourite one.
But I really don't. This is why I was a bit reluctant this morning, because it's not just Tony. It's like loads of people, and Lindsay gets the same thing. People phone up all the time, wanting to know things, wanting to pick your brains about a period of history that was like a pile of crap. That wasn't that valuable to anybody. I mean, even Alan didn't get rich. And he was promoting everything.
Well, that was that other quote, wasn't there? Some people make millions, others make history.
Well.
No, I mean, I'm just sorry, I'm just laughing.
I'm sorry I can't really, give you a great optimistic...
No, well, there's no need to. Because, I mean, it's all part and parcel, you know what I mean?
I do carry around a lot of baggage.
All right, go on.
Start again from the fascist claptrap.
So why didn't Rabid Records do the Ideal for Living EP by Joy Division? Because you were onto them before.
Actually, the EP was already produced. What we did was we distributed it, and because we'd already got a kind of system running, we knew how to distribute stuff. But Martin was quite, adamant that we should do them, we should record them, we should take them on as on our label. And having looked at the Ideal for Living sleeve, I thought, I'm having nothing to do with this. It was complete, it was kind of fascist imagery. And I've had stick for this for years for coming out against it, And I think that's one of the reasons why Tony and I kind of didn't see eye to eye right at the beginning, because they were, on the sleeve, they were dressed in short trousers, Nazi sort of ties, and a drummer boy, It was absolute fascist iconography. And in that, he said to me, he comes up in 24-hour Party People, because he came out with this thing where I said to him, it's fascist claptrap, and he said, are you unaware of postmodern irony? And that's one of the greatest quotes he ever came out with. Are you unaware of postmodern irony? And I thought, what? Oh, am I? To me, it was just fascist nonsense, And I think that set us against one another in the early period, because I think he thought I was just getting at him all the time, and I wasn't really. I just thought that kind of imagery was a bit unnecessary.
I'll give you a great... Are you Irish descent, Tosh?
Of course.
Here's a great quote. Samuel Johnson about the Irish. What did he say?
Who's that?
Samuel Johnson about the Irish.
No idea.
They've not got a good word to say about anybody. So Lindsay, did your sort of association with the Manchester music scene more or less finish, when you stopped being married to Tony?
No, you do know it was me that got the Stone Roses their record deal, don't you? It was. In fact, I had a contract for 10% of their income. And I didn't take anything from our marriage because I kind of had everything to play for. And it was quite funny because, Tony sacked me actually, but we didn't speak for about 3 years. And it was quite funny because I had the Stone Roses and he had the Happy Mondays, and they were on Top of the Pops together the same night. So I thought, oh, my band's better than your band anyway.
Oh, is that why he was so kind of... he was quite venomous about the Stone Roses for a while, or would always insist to me, this was our arguments at the time, because I said, well, the Mondays were riding very much on the coattails of the Stone Roses, and Tony would insist it was the other way round. Yeah,
well, he would, wouldn't he? Because his band was always the greatest band in the world, whoever they were. I mean, Raw Tea, have you ever even thought they were?
Where we live.
Anyway, will that do?
No, that's quite funny. But no, that was it. I mean, what was that in many ways Tony's Achilles heel, is that he kind of, he was that passionate and cared so much about his own bands that often it was to the detriment of other bands in Manchester.
Well, he was just dead enthusiastic about his own, wasn't he, really? So they were the best. So yours was second best. But I think the Stone Roses were better than the Happy Mondays. But they were both quite good, weren't they, in the time?
And the Smiths as well.
I like the Smiths.
I love the Smiths.
Tony couldn't stand Morrissey. Anyway.
Why was that?
He thought he was one of those words that begins with C.
Clown.
But I can't remember why, to be honest. You better not put that in. It's not very nice, is it?
No, it's
all right. But
he
really thought he thinks he's... He said them. I think he thinks he's one of the worst people on this planet. But I quite like him. Morrissey, do you not like him?
Well, he's come up against it again, hasn't he, this last few weeks with his remarks. That's the second time round he's gone a bit crackers, hasn't he?
I was just laughing at what Marquis Smith said to me about Morrissey back in '84.
What?
He said, well, Morrissey. Well, because there was all this stuff in the press about Morrissey having a go at Marquis Smith because he thought Marquis Smith had a go at him when Marquis Smith hadn't said anything. He said, well, I'm not really bothered. He said, I quite like the Smith. He said, but Morrissey, he said, I said, well, what do you think of him? He said, well, as far as I'm concerned, he's just a paranoid faggot. He's just a boy George with short hair. Nice.
You're going to have a right job.
Martin Moskrop, A Certain Ratio.
So, Martin, when did you first meet Tony Wilson?
First meet. Well, it was Rob Gretton that introduced us to Tony because Rob had seen A Certain Ratio playing at Band on the Wall, Musicians Collective Night, and he really liked us. I think we might have been playing with Warsaw. I don't think they were Joy Division quite yet. And he really liked us, and he told Tony Wilson about us. So I think the next gig that we did might have been at Band on the Wall again, because he used to play about every 4 weeks or something. Because there was only a small group of people in the Musicians Collective, so the rotation happened pretty quickly, you know. And I think Tony came to see the next gig, and he really liked us. He thought we were like sort of a young Mancunian Velvet Underground or something. And he just got dead interested in us and said, do you want to make a record? And with the record came, you need a manager, we'll manage you, sort of thing. So it all happened pretty quickly, it all snowballed pretty quickly. But it was down to Rob, the fact that we met Tony, really.
And again, you know, those days at Factory Records, because there was a little period, wasn't there, where you were probably as big, if not even bigger than New Order.
Well, not bigger than New Order, but I mean there was a period before Unknown Pleasures. You know, we used to do quite a lot of factory gigs together, but before Unknown Pleasures, you know, we'd probably got if they did a headlining gig, they'd probably be lucky if they got, you know, maybe 100, 150 people, and the same with us at the beginning. So, I mean, yeah, in the very early days of Factory, I suppose, because we actually the Factory Sampler was the first vinyl record on Factory, but it was a EP, it was a compilation. I think All Night Party by A Certain Ratio was the first band only single on Factory. So yeah, I mean we you know, even when Joy Division started becoming pretty popular, you never sort of felt, you never saw it in terms of popularity. You know, it was quite a socialist movement, really, the way that you treated each other and the way that you were friends. And on those factory gigs that we used to do around the UK, it was such a good vibe and atmosphere, you know, with all the bands together, and we used to have a lot of fun.
I was going to say, explain about that fun, because obviously to outsiders at the time, it'd be all these very cool articles in the NME, you know, of like, you know, guys who live in Hume and all the rest of it.
With
and
long raincoats.
Yeah,
and
like sort of, and it was uber cool, wasn't it? It wasn't just cool, it was uber cool.
Yeah.
And yet, really, you were a bunch of beer monsters, weren't you?
Yeah, but bunch of beer monsters, party animals, like Mancunians have been for centuries, you know. Ever since the Industrial Revolution, really, it's work hard, play hard, and you know it was typically a bunch of working class Manchester lads. Each, you know, A Certain Ratio was, Joy Division were. I mean, we did have a bit of press in the early days where people used to say A Certain Ratio were Factory's middle class band, even though, you know, Donald and Tony are from Wythenshawe, and Pete and Simon were from Urmston, you know. Jez was from Prestwich. So we used to get a little bit of stick. I suppose it was because we were a little bit more experimental musically then. I mean, you wouldn't see that now because everyone thinks that Joy Division, if you reflect now, they were very experimental. But they were quite rocky. You know, they'd taken the punk thing a bit further and mixed it with people like The Doors and that sort of thing. And to us, Joy Division's music was quite just rock music, really, whereas we were trying to be anti-rock at the time, you know. So we thought we were cooler than them because they just played rock music.
Post-industrial funketeers.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Again, and what were your impressions of Tony Wilson, you know, before you met him and when you first met him?
Well, he was that guy off the TV. You know, everyone's impression of Tony was from the TV. You know, he was a newsreader, and then obviously with So It Goes, which gave him a little bit more credibility. But don't forget, Tony had the most uncool hairstyle, long hair, cowboy boots, flares in 1977-78. So even though you thought he was, you know, because he was famous, you sort of looked up to him. But on the other side, you thought, he's a bit uncool, Tony, because of the way he dresses. But then the creative side of him overshadowed that. So loads of sort of mixed feelings about him, really. And because he didn't mind having the piss taken out of him, people just used to take the mickey out of him all the time. And he sort of brought it on himself in a way, because he had a posh accent. He had like a posh Oxford accent, even though he's from Salford. The way he dressed, there was a lot of things that made people treat him the way that they did, you know. But, you know, no matter what people were saying to him, he'd always just have a smile on his face and shrug and pass it over.
Well, I think he used to almost troll for that, and he quite enjoyed it.
Yeah. Just say that again, Terry.
I used to almost think that he'd troll for people and take the mickey out of him a bit, because he quite enjoyed it, and he just wanted to think, would you? Because a lot of people daren't do it to him.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people who do that will let you take the piss out of them, and then they'll have a really clever answer, right, just to sort of make you look silly. Tony would do that occasionally, but most of the time he'd just sap it up and just let you make your comment, you know. I think he was quite happy the fact that you were willing to give him the attention, really, at the end of the day. So he didn't mind.
But again, you know, with all those sort of factory days, you know, obviously they weren't the best businessmen at factory. I mean, how annoyed did you sometimes get with Tony? Because you know, you'd meet people and you know they all liked him, but you know there'd be those days where you know he would annoy the hell out of people. Yeah.
Well, my dad always used to say, "What's Tony Wilson doing about your tax?" And because we were self-employed, and I used to say, "Don't worry, Dad, he's sorting it out." And then, of course, years later, we had a massive tax investigation, and luckily we got away with it because we sort of pleaded that we were too young and we didn't know what was going on and we didn't handle our own money affairs. He didn't do it. He would never be poor on the financial side intentionally. It's just not what he was interested in. If you think about recently, you know, before Tony passed away, you'd get record shops in Manchester selling factory T-shirts, Hacienda, New Order, Joy Division. You can buy bootlegs of that stuff. You can buy posters. You know, Tony never minded other people making money out of things that they had invented because he thinks that it's everyone's right to take a bit of that, and if people want to be creative or take something that's happened and use it for themselves, that's okay. He was never ever possessive with things, you know. So I think that unpossessiveness and his unmaterialistic attitude made him a bad businessman. But what is a businessman? A businessman, first and foremost, is someone who comes up with a brilliant idea, yeah, that will generate interest, income, and creativity. Then the second thing is making money out of that. He's just the first thing, and the making the money just so happened to happen, but he didn't intend it to happen, you know. His investment in Factory Records in the first place was just for his own creativity. It wasn't to make any money out of.
Again, nowadays, you know, of course, Peter Hook, he's got all the rights to, you know, the Hacienda, the factory thing, which has annoyed some people who are involved in that label and also the Hacienda.
Yeah.
You know, that it's not being shared out. I mean, how do you personally feel about that?
How do I personally feel about that? I think, really, I'm DJing with Pete in Brussels on Saturday night, so I better be careful what I say here. I'm not really. I think that whole Hacienda thing should be left how it is, really. I think, you know, the thing about the New World Tour and taking it out around the world and that sort of thing. Yeah, it's nice giving other people a taste of it, but it's not the true hacienda, is it? It might have a few DJs that played there before, but I think, you know, the hacienda historically should really be left alone for people, you know, to talk about and think about and write about now and stuff like that. It doesn't really need to keep on being regurgitated. So I'm not a massive fan of that. I'm not a big fan at all of the hacienda apartments. Every time I drive past it, I get sort of angry about it, because I just think, you know, why have they been allowed to use that name? Okay, it's in the same spot, and I suppose it is nice for tourists to come and see where the hacienda was, and there's actually a building there called the hacienda, but it's not one of the best looking buildings in the world. And you know, I'm not totally against it, but I'm not a big fan of trying to make things last forever, you know.
But again, you know, if you look at Manchester and think about the Manchester that ACR were in, you know, in those sort of days of punk, you know, coming up to post-punk, if you like. Oh, no, hang on a sec. I mean, how is Manchester very different now to how it was, let's say, in 1977 when, you know, ACR was starting out?
Okay, well, Manchester was a very grim place at the time. I mean, you know, we still had the aftermath of you know, pollution from coal, so all the buildings were black. I remember going down I remember one of my first memories of Oldham Street, and it just being full of empty shops. Not hardly one shop was used there. And I don't know if you remember, but the days when you only had the ground floor of a building was used and every floor above it was just empty. You know, so if you needed a rehearsal room as a band or something like that, it was really good if you could find a landlord who had an empty room upstairs. So it was a pretty grim place. I mean, unemployment was high. It was very smoggy and foggy, and it was quite a grim place, really. You know, the only thing that we thought was special about it in the late 70s and early 80s was, well, personally, me being a Red as well, was Manchester United, who weren't that good at the time. And the fact that we always thought we were better than people from down south, you know, that was the sort of thing that kept us going. But, you know, one of the things that people don't realise about Manchester, it's a very small place. You know, and everyone knows everyone, and you must know by all the people that you're interviewing for this program that you know all those people, don't you? And they all know each other. And I mean, that's not just because they're from a certain generation, but even if you go out to sort of quite younger nights now, like the Electric Chair crew. I mean, all those people that go to the Electric Chair, they all know each other. They're all friends. Lots of them work in creative industries. They do lots of different things. But at the end of the day, if you say, do you know so-and-so, you know, 9 times out of 10, the person you're speaking to knows that person, and everyone knows. So it is, the thing that makes Manchester unique is that smallness, you know.
Cohesiveness.
Yeah. I mean, you know, a lot of people look at sort of a map of Greater Manchester and see it as this massive, big place. But actual Manchester's tiny, isn't it? You know, the Manchester itself. And I just think that, you know, that makes it a unique and special place, and always has done. That cohesiveness, like you say.
And you know, when you look back now, you know, at Tony Wilson, even though he never did your tax, and there were all sorts of other things involved, you know, with ACR, you moved to A&M and everything. Because again, you know, there's loads of areas of music where his knowledge wasn't great. He didn't even understand what was going on at the Hacienda half the time, and yet in a weird way, he was a catalyst for all of this because he was so interested in everything that was going on. So he made us seem glamorous, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, Tony was full of ideas, but all those ideas inside his head weren't his own ideas, right? What Tony was really good at was, as you know, because you know him, knew him personally, he had the time of day for everyone. So if someone wanted to talk to him and someone had an idea, he would take it on board and then, you know, I'm not saying he'd pinch people's ideas, but he'd help people with ideas. He'd help people push things forward. Like if you went to him with an idea for writing a book, he'd say, "That's a brilliant idea. Why don't you write that book? You know, I think that's really good." And he'd encourage and he'd motivate people. So, you know, his creativity was non-stop, not just within himself, but the way that he sort of pushed other people and motivated other people to do things.
Can you imagine what would have happened if there hadn't have been a Tony Wilson in Manchester?
I can. I always say, you know, like, wherever you go in the world and people say, where are you from? And you say Manchester, apart from the odd knobhead in America that says, what, Manchester, London? Excuse me. Sorry. Well, they're hard to switch off these, aren't they? Yeah, wherever you go in the world and you tell people that you're from Manchester, you know, they'll always say one of three things. You know, they'll always say, oh, Manchester United, or the Hacienda, or Factory Records, you know, and it's recognised mainly for those three things. And Tony was involved with two of them quite heavily, you know.
And now a third, because his name's going to go on that famous wall at the town hall next to Alex Ferguson.
Yeah.
So you can say he's involved in all three.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So, yeah, I think Manchester would have been a totally different place without Tony. You know, you could say the same for Rob Gretton. You could say the same for Joy Division, but I don't think Rob would have been motivated and been able to do what he did without Tony, you know, because they probably would have signed to a label in London or something.
I mean, if somebody said to you 25 years ago or even 15 years ago, oh, look, there'd be two movies out worldwide all about Factory Records and stuff like that, would you have believed them?
No, I wouldn't have believed that it was worth writing about at the time. But then, after seeing them and seeing the way that other people conceive it, then you know, it's like, I know if you go to the States and you meet someone from LA or New York and they say, where do you live? And you say Manchester, and they go, oh wow, aren't you lucky? I wish I lived in Manchester. And you think, what are you going on about? You live in LA, you know.
I actually had someone say that to me. Say, that was at the Hacienda night at the Mayan in you know, when I was filming for The Word before The Word had even been on.
Yeah.
And this girl started crying when I told her that the Stone Roses weren't playing at the Hollywood High School or whatever. And then this same girl then later on said, hey, I mean, you're from Manchester, aren't you? I said, yeah. I said, and you know, you know some cool people there, you know, and all this. I said, yeah. She said, I can't believe you wearing Quicksilver. Big luminescent surf T-shirt on. Yeah. I suppose she was right, really, thinking about it. But yeah, I mean, Manchester has become almost too glamorous for Mancunians now, hasn't it?
Yeah, it is glamorous. I mean, it's lost a little bit of the old, you know, the sort of cliquiness and the, you know, the roughness around the edges because of all the development and stuff that's gone on. But I don't think it's really changed for centuries that much. Like I said before, you know, since the Industrial Revolution, it's always been a bit of a party city because of the work ethic and stuff like that. And I still think, you know, underneath it is like that, you know. Maybe not as prevalent as it was in the past, but things just go in cycles. So, you know, who's to know? Maybe in a few years' time, the next cycle will come round. We're short of clubs at the moment. You know, since we lost the Hacienda, we haven't got the sort of club life anymore as it used to be, and we haven't got a decent mid-sized music venue, you know, since the Boardwalk and the Band on the Wall closed down. So there are little gaps there at the moment, but it's just a little period we're going through, you know.
And now coming more up today, when was the last time you actually saw Tony?
I think it might have been. Yeah, okay. Yeah, the last time I saw Tony was I did an interview here with him. Forget it's for Radio 6 maybe, and I can't remember what it was about. It must have been about Factory Records. That was not that long ago. Or I can't remember actually. It might have been at South by Southwest in Texas when he was talking about Factory Records. And he was always a really good speaker on those panels at music conventions. Yeah, I can't remember actually. I'll have to think about that one.
And how did you feel, you know, when you heard the news of his death, you know, personally?
The way I feel when I hear the news about anyone's death, it doesn't actually sink in, and I don't feel that upset and shocked. But then the thing that shocked me, I wasn't even, you know, after I went to the wake after his funeral, and I still thought, why aren't I upset about his death? But it was the next day. I don't know, I think I picked up an evening news and there was photographs of his funeral then, and that's when it really, really sunk in, and when I really got upset. So, yeah, a bit of a delayed reaction really, sort of coming to terms with the reality of it. And I remember feeling the same way about Rob's death, but you know what you've got to remember is that you know these are people that really, really helped my career and that I knew personally, you know, and the three people who were really involved in my career, from Martin Hannett to Tony Wilson to Rob Gretton, they're all dead now, which is quite a scary thought, you know, because a lot of the people that I know who worked around those people are still quite young and still, you know, still active in the industry. So yeah, it's scary. It was quite upsetting and scary, really.
And how do you think he'll be remembered, Tony?
It's funny because when he was alive, people would always remember him as maybe a bit of a dickhead sometimes, a bit middle class. I mean, if you think of 24 Hour Party People, a lot of people think it's a documentary and that it's true. But I think Steve Coogan was the perfect person to play Tony Wilson, because in a lot of ways Tony was like Alan Partridge, and Steve Coogan is just like Alan Partridge anyway. So, you know, people used to think of him like that when he was alive, but I think now that he's not here anymore, people really have seen him for what he is, you know, for what a nice guy he was. It's like when I came in before, David Reese, who used to go to school with me, is on reception security, you know, and he commented on how nice Tony was, and every time he came in, you know, he had time for everyone. He'd make sure that he'd say hello to whoever's on security and be nice to them and that sort of thing, whereas most people in that position wouldn't have the time of day for most people, would they? Because they can't be being bothered by everyone, you know. So, yeah, I think he'll be remembered as a really nice, creative guy.